So our first item of business is going to be swearing in of our new committee members and youth committee members. Okay.
For the new members, please stand up. And raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Victoria Leonard,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I will take this obligation freely
that I will take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you.
Roll call. Mayor Robin Grunmeyer,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kevin Dash,
Here.
Councilmember Catherine Alman,
Here.
Councilmember Berwin Hanna,
Here.
Councilmember Greg Newton,
Here.
Committee Chair Yvonne Schull,
Here.
Vice Chair Susan Olmsted Bowen,
Here.
Member Richard Biesmer,
Here.
Member Jerry Burke,
Here.
Member Sheen Gill,
Sean.
Sean Gill,
Here.
Member John Claucom,
Blacker. Here. That's close.
Member Victoria Leonard,
Here.
and Youth Commissioner Omar Sanchez.
Here.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you everybody for being here. Congratulations and welcome to the new members of Measure R. Today our joint workshop is to discuss city financing and Norco's finances in general. So at this time, I am going to hand it over to Lori.
Thank you, Mayor. So, thanks everybody for gathering and spending the time tonight. I thought we probably would start with a little bit of history on how we got here to tonight and to kind of frame what we're hoping to do over the next several weeks. So, last year, coming out of our budget discussions around uses of Measure R and some of the discussions and debate around uses of Measure R, actually pulled out my own notebook because I'm a note taker. It was June 7th, and in the context of that discussion, as the council was adopting the budget, the council said, look, we want to have some conversation with the committee. You know, normally the council meets, the committee meets, you all don't get a chance to really dialogue and work together in a really direct way. So we talked about pulling you guys together, trying to build kind of a baseline of knowledge and information so we can work together and share together on that and come together. So this is really what this is meant to do. And someone brought up, let's do some workshops together. So that's what we're here to do tonight. It's really, we brought you here together to this room to create more of a conversation and an interaction among you, to discuss and talk about all the information, and kind of hoping to do this over a series of meetings to build that collaboration. So this first night is really focused, as you saw my email, on, I'll call it a baseline of the difficulties we have in local government financing in California, right? I've got some slides I'll roll through with you. We're not going to talk in detail about the numbers for Norco tonight. We're talking more about what are the concepts, how are local governments financed, organized and financed in California, what are the particular challenges that cities face. Then we'll roll into a little bit about Norco, the big picture challenges that Norco has faced at financing. And then I'll end with a little bit of my version of SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats with regard to Measure R, I'm sorry, not Measure R, but the city's financing in general. Then workshop 2, a future meeting, we haven't set that date, but I think it'll probably be in November or December. We're gonna go back and look at kind of the history of Measure R. What happened, how did we get here, where was the city before Measure R came along? What transpired is the formation of the measure, and then what's transpired since. So that's workshop 2. And then workshop 3 to follow that will be hearing from Lisette, kind of like, where are the numbers for us? What are the projections looking like? What are our challenges? How does our budget roll? And we'll kind of talk about that. So that's kind of the idea. And then I guess if there's anything else you think about that you want us to bring and talk about in these future meetings, please let us know. Our goal here is to facilitate conversation for you. So with that, please stop me at any time as I buzz through these slides. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to really touch on them, but you have a copy of them so you can take them home, digest them. We can talk about them next time if you want. But again, my high-level view that I'm trying to give you today is very challenging. Cities are very challenging in California, so that's what we're going to dive into. And thank you to Kelly Newton, who did assist on these slides. Very helpful. Okay, so again, I just went through this, our workshop series goals. Okay, so my outline for today, kind of the big picture here, revenues, expenditures. Oh, I just did all this. Look, I should hit play on the slides. Okay, so how do even cities in California form? So there's 2 different ways that cities form in California. You can incorporate under the general laws of California. That's why they're called general law cities. Most of our cities in California are general law, and in fact, Norco was general law until one time. Or the other way to incorporate is with your own city charter. So two different, oh, that wants me to get closer to my. It lands you in the same way. About 25% of cities, really back in 50 years ago, the charter cities really had much more home rule authority, it's called, much more direct authority of what they did over municipal affairs. But it is not so much these days, but it's been eroded by the state. Norco, as many of you probably know, became a charter city about 20 years ago, and really this was around preserving the lifestyle, making sure that our rural, animal keeping, agricultural focus was preserved, and it requires a 4/5 vote to really rezone and look at changing land uses. And I'm sure there's an amazing story about why that happened. That might be a really great story for another day. So like I mentioned here though, so the charter cities do have some additional home rule authority, but the state can trump. So often you'll see when you read legislation, in the introductory paragraphs it'll say something like, and the legislature determines that this matter is of statewide concern. That's code for charter cities, you have to comply with this. You don't get a pass. So it's unfortunate, but this has kind of been where California's been going. So what are the powers then? So you get to incorporate, you're actually an incorporation, you incorporate as a charter city or a general law city. What do you have to do? Well, you have to adopt a balanced budget. Unlike the state, unlike the feds, we do effectively have to adopt a balanced budget, unless you can get 2/3 of the voters to say you don't have to, which I would put in the impossible category. And these are the other things we have to do. So we have obligations and responsibilities to deliver balanced budgets, complete an audit, file those budgets with the county. These are slides, and I'll give credit to, there's a gentleman named Michael Coleman, who's kind of a legend in city finances. You've seen him speak lots of times at finance officers, maybe Susan you have too. He's a great kind of custodian of history and some tutorials around local government finance. He consults for the League of California Cities. So this is a slide that he does at mayor and council member training. And this one I think is important to understand that role that elected officials have. So the summary of this is the elected officials, while they take input from us as staff or you as advisory commissioners or members of the community, that under state law, that fiduciary role, those responsibilities rest with the council. They have to make the final calls with regard to anything related to financing in our cities. That cannot be delegated. It can't be delegated to me, it can't be delegated to you, it can't be, it's there, 5 of them get to have that. So here's another really important part of understanding the complexity of what we do. And I think this is hard for residents. Council members are painfully aware of this, but it's hard for residents to grasp that much, if not most, of what we do is driven by other levels of government. We're probably one of the most highly regulated industries that exists. If we didn't have to respond to other levels of government, more than 50% of what we do would not get done. So I gave you some examples of here of things that we have a responsibility to do, to budget for, to get done, that would not necessarily be our choice at all times. I mean, obviously some of these we would run the water and sewer system, but the way we run those are largely dictated by state and federal regulation. The way we maintain personnel policies, practices, the way we do labor relations, all dictated by the state. So this is a subtlety that's really important to understand, because as you start to dig into how this money is spent and understand that much of this is not glamorous, and most of this, many residents may prefer that we didn't have to spend time on this, but we do. Okay, so let's talk about how city revenues come in, how the money comes in, revenues. This is another great Michael Coleman slide, and it just makes me laugh, because I've been in government for most of this time, not all of it. This is kind of a journey of what has happened in local government finance in California since the adoption of Prop 13 in the 70s. And it's been a whirlwind. And I think that the takeaway from this is that to understand, as cities, we never know where the other shoe is dropping. There's always seems to be, as you look at this road, there's always another twist or turn coming along, and we are rarely, I'll say never is probably not true, but we're rarely on the beneficiary end of these twists and turns. Some of the highlights here for me are the ERAF shift in the 80s, or the 90s, early 90s, where the state shifted property tax away from cities and counties and into the educational system. A huge problem. They literally just took our money and shifted it to the schools. Prop 218 that passed in 1996, it sounded like a great idea. Let's give, everyone should have the right to vote on taxes. That sounds, agreed. I think we would all agree with that. But there were unintended consequences there where we left many revenues stranded. And to this day, we have revenues that are still at their 1996 levels. Why? Because they're frozen in time by Prop 218. There's some other good ones. Prop 1A, you'll see there kind of on the bottom, that was actually a good one. That was where the League of Cities got together and decided we were tired of state taking city funding, and the voters actually approved a proposition that requires the voter approval to take certain local property tax and sales tax. That was one win we had in the middle of all this. Another big loss is 2012 and the dissolution of redevelopment agencies. So I don't think it's coincidental that a lot of our housing crisis and crunch we see for folks living at the lower end coincides with the end of redevelopment, because redevelopment was the one tool that cities had to get a little pot of money to do some lower income housing like we have at the end of Clark with the senior affordable and the age restricted affordable. That money all disappeared. It went to the state. So that was awful. And that money also was used to fund infrastructure. Cities were spending this in building fire stations, doing flood control, doing grade separations and freeways, and all that just was wiped out by the state, went back to the state's coffers.
Laurie, see this since 2011, has there been any
Yeah.
sort of update?
Yeah, there's been all kinds of nonsense
Okay.
since then too. Yes, yes. The one big one that comes to mind, and we'll talk about it in the property tax context, is when the state shifted VLF took vehicle license fees that were previously a really significant city revenue, took that and backfilled with property tax by a very complicated formula. That's another thing that's happened more recently. There's some things brewing we're going to talk about. So, as you can imagine, this is very frustrating to those of us in this world, because it just feels like the ground is always shifting under our feet, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You just can't get things stabilized. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the big revenues to cities. You know, people say, excuse me, well, I pay property taxes, right? Doesn't that go to my city? Where does that money go, right? Yeah. Well, we wish. No, it does not go to your cities. Prop 13 was great. It solved a problem with The people, their tax values were growing by so much, so it capped the escalator at 2%. That's great in theory. Again, it was good for the property owner and saved a lot of elderly folks from losing their homes. That was a problem to solve for sure. But again, the world of unintended consequences comes to play here. And so now today, 40 years later, you have folks living next door to each other, right? One pays $200 a year, and one pays $20,000 a year. All depends on when they bought their home, right? So Prop 13 changed the allocation among cities and counties. We'll get into that in a little bit. The big one at the bottom here, the number 6, is prior to Prop 13, cities actually administered their own property taxes. And that authority was all shifted to the state at that time. So this is not specific to Norco. This is just giving you the big picture of what happened in terms of the Prop 13. Remember, it was retroactive. If you had a city that was incorporated around there, it was kind of confusing to people because they thought, well, no, I would incorporate it before Prop 13. No, Prop 13 was voted on in 78, but retroactive to 76, so that really hit some folks in the shorts. And took property taxes down by 57%. So those of you who are around remember just draconian cuts at that time, trying to make budgets balance at that time. And this is the allocation, about half was going to schools at that time. This is feeling my pain here. So this is, again, statewide where property tax goes. Most of it goes to the schools, the vast majority, and then to the counties. There's a small piece overall. Now this is just a general rule of thumb. It depends on the city, and I'm going to tell you what share Norco gets when we get to the Norco part. But the illustrative part here for me is to educate our community members that that bill, whatever your bill is, the majority of that is not coming back to your city. It's paying for other kinds of services, counties and schools. Now, I mentioned this property tax in lieu of VL's lift shift. Again, the law of unintended consequences has been a little bit on our side as this has happened. So we used to get those vehicle license fees, and they didn't grow too fast, right? They were based on the value of your car. Remember back in the day when it was like a $400 or $500 bill from DMV, remember those times? So, and the car so good, remember that? Oh, I remember that.
Still do.
You do, and you fit. I drive an old car, correct, so. mine's $180, but I'm cheap, so. So the state did a switcheroo, took our property tax, took our VLF and gave us property tax in lieu. And when they did this, they said, okay, we're gonna let that grow by the assessed value of property in your communities. If you look at the years that started back around 2010, well, that action was followed by unprecedented growth in real estate value, right? So the state has been required to shovel us back quite a bit more money. So actually, in the end, this one worked out kind of to our benefit. I would argue we probably are getting more in property tax in lieu of VLF than we ever would have gotten in VLF at this time if we had kept there. So that's just kind of interesting. So now when you look at our property tax revenues, base property tax doesn't grow that fast, but the property tax in lieu of VLF sure does. Okay, so a little bit about sales tax. So we have sales and use tax. They're used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. And we'll get into why this is important later. But they're close. They're really, really close. Basically, if you're not paying sales tax, you're probably paying use tax unless it's not taxable, like something like groceries are not taxable, right, in California. So where does sales tax go? Well, again, this is the base 7.25 state rate. And as you can see, the cities receive 1% of that total base of 7.25. Or another way of looking at it, 1 cent on the dollar. Sometimes this is confusing to people. It's not 1% of 7.25, it's one of the percentages of the 7.25, right? You get 1% of, if somebody spends $100, the tax is $7.25, you get $1. Where does most of the tax go? Once again, the state goes to the counties. One thing to think about in the counties too, counties are technically subdivisions of the state. Did you know that they are actually arms of the state? So there's a lot, the state can play with the county revenues even more directly than they can cities, where cities incorporate separately. So very interesting. And fun fact too, this is why the state, this is the legal premise behind the dissolution of redevelopment, was that redevelopment agencies were actually agencies of the state from the beginning. And somebody in Jerry Brown's administration figured that out, and that's why they were able to dissolve redevelopment agencies, because they were state agencies. Anywho, then we have district taxes, and this is Measure R. It's a district tax, right? It's not a sales tax, although we refer to it that way. It's a district tax, and it's based either on where the transaction takes place or where the goods are delivered to. Just kind of, so it roughly mirrors sales tax, but it is not the same. The big exception is the folks that are returning to Measure R know. The big exception on this, that's the common one, is with regard to purchase of vehicles. So when you purchase your vehicle, that 1% Bradley Burns that comes to Norco, if you buy your vehicle in Norco, that 1% always comes to Norco if you buy it at a Norco dealer. But if you buy it at a Norco dealer and you live in Newport Beach, you do not pay Measure R district tax because you live in Newport Beach. The vehicle is going to Newport Beach. Flip that around. If you live in Norco and you buy a car in Newport Beach, you will pay Measure R sales tax on that car because the car is coming to Norco. So, I know it's a bit of a brain puzzle, right? That makes sense? Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Yeah, it's based on destinations, exactly. Okay, here's another one that's become really prominent for cities and definitely for Norco. Interestingly, TOT, or known as hotel tax or bed tax, this is one of the very few revenues, major revenues, that the state's not in, and I put yet. So every month, Lisette gets statements from the hotels in Norco. They literally send us the check. It doesn't go to the county or the state, it comes to us. Always under state law, applies under user reviewer, you see our rate there, and you know, the city fathers were wise to adjust the Norco tax rate several years back before we had any hotels. The voters approved that. That was great. But I put the warning on here about state intervention. So this year, one of our legislators, not from our area, had this idea that would take, and it effectively take 15% of all the TOT on SRTs, meaning Airbnbs, those sorts of things, and divert it to a new housing fund. That got fought off, but it's a 2-year bill. It may come back. It doesn't have direct impacts on Norco because we don't permit SRTs in Norco, but the nose under the camel's tent is a little terrifying. You know, we would definitely impose this just on principle that TOT is a local revenue. The state has no business getting involved in TOT. It's our money locally to decide how to use. So, and then I put on there CDTFA would administer. So not only would they take the money, CDTFA is the California Department of Tax and Finance Authority, Tax and Financing Administration. They administer property tax and sales tax. They would administer TOT. It's a terrible idea. So again, another example of how we lose to the state. Yes, sir.
Question.
Yeah.
How much do we bring in every year on the TOT?
That's a great question. We'll have to get back to you on that, Brian.
Okay.
It's millions.
Before we built the first hotel, we got the voters to raise it up to 11%.
We'll let you know about that. We're gonna get in, like I said, in detail on that stuff at the last workshop, but we'll get you a number. It's become a very significant revenue for Norco. Absolutely, very significant.
Isn't 7% actually low compared to most cities?
There are a number of cities that have a much higher rate. I think 10% in this area is about average. Riverside, I believe, is at 12 or 12.5. If you go to Anaheim, I think you're close to 17%. If you go to San Diego, Palm Springs, so any of the bigger places that have tourism, they have different rates. Yeah, so it's definitely not high.
When we did it, this was high. A lot of people thought it would pass.
So that's why our hotels are full most of the time, because people don't pay it, the higher fees, right?
You would think that to be true, but there's actually been a number of studies done by a lot of the tourism districts to show that the folks don't, the tourists, people who are visiting, actually don't make decisions based on that. Now, I think we all do when you go on a search engine and you tell me the price with tax, effectively you're doing that, right? Because you're looking at that. But not as many people as you think really take it into account. It's very fascinating. But I know I do. I always check the box, tell me with taxes. Casitas, you know?
Or resort.
Yeah, and then park and resort fees and parking. They kill you on parking. But I think that we have an advantage in that we have hotels that are really centrally located to our two big draws, which are Silver Lakes and Ingalls, and they're reasonably priced. So they're good family spots to go. And they're full all the weekends.
Laurie, last fiscal year 21-22 was 1 million.
Oh, just $1 million. But what about 22, 23?
It's a little increase.
Yeah. Okay. Big revenue. Okay, other significant revenues, I won't get into these too much, but I just wanted to put, these are just fascinating. Again, franchise fees, cable TV franchises used to be huge. How many of you still have cable TV? Anybody have cable TV? Greg does. All right, good job, Greg.
For my mother.
Did you? So, you know, that's been a dying thing. Now, cell phones were subject to, well, that's a different issue. That's TOT. So video is taken over by the state. We also used to have cable TV franchises. We used to be able to squeeze, shake down cable companies for money. We don't need to do that anymore. It's all franchised by the state and been declining. I mentioned Prop 218. For most cities, it's very common. Most cities, their business license rates are frozen in time to 1996. It will take voter approval to change those. And business licensing is so complicated. There have been some cities that have tried to do valid measures for business license. It's very hard. It's hard to explain it. All the rates all over the board. So most cities have just sort of left their frozen in time. And then we do get a bit of revenue on these other ones here. Okay, the other big one though is fees for services. So fees are not the same as taxes. Now some of our residents, some folks may use those interchangeably, but they're really legally and practically two different things. Taxes you don't get to avoid, right? Taxes are things like you gotta pay it when you buy your shoes at Target, or you gotta pay it on your car, you gotta pay it on your house. Fees are costs for things that you get to decide if you want them or not, right? You get to decide if you want to go drop in for recreational pickleball and pay your a couple dollars that you charge for pickleball. You get to decide if you want to rent a picnic shelter. You actually get to decide if you want to come in and get your building permit or not, right? Do you want to build? That's not required, so we charge you a permit. They're based on the cost to provide the service. We are under the current standards, we do a reasonable estimation of the cost, and that becomes the ceiling for the cost of the fee. It's not a floor. So the council can always make a policy determination to charge under that calculation, but you can't charge above it. And I've got some examples there. These are very important to us. These are very significant revenue to us too. Okay, now there is an initiative out there, talk about more changing landscape. There's an initiative that's qualified for the 2024 ballot. This is the name of it. It's sponsored by a group called the Business Roundtable. That group is comprised of all kinds of major corporations from around the country. And essentially, they are trying to complicate the way we calculate fees. It's got all kinds of other things in there too. It's changing requirements for voting on taxes. It would actually undo tax measures like Measure R that were passed after January of 2022, so that doesn't apply to us, thank God. But there's people who have passed tax measures since January of 2022. This would unravel those measures and require them to go back to the voters for reapproval. But it would change the baseline for how we calculate fees. So it would take it from that current standard of a reasonable estimated cost and a new standard called actual cost. And this is the quote from the legislation about clear and convincing evidence. So what does that mean? I have absolutely no idea. How do I determine, based on clear and convincing evidence, the actual cost for someone to come in and play pickleball in the gym? I mean, it's ludicrous. How do I determine? It's always going to be an estimate, right? It's always based on some sort of reasonable standard. So this is a recipe for litigation. And frankly, in my opinion, if this gets over the finish line, it's going to be the death of 1,000 cuts for local agencies, because all of our fees will end up frozen in time, like business license, and not today or tomorrow, but over the years, it'll just erode our ability to fund things. So there's a lot of coalition of folks against this. There's some good people that are for it. I think they don't quite understand the unintended consequences here. But
Talking
Norco's,
about this at Cal Cities, they predict that 30% percent of the cities in the state of California would go under.
Yeah.
this. Wow.
I believe it. Because you'll be stuck doing things you can't be paid for. We'll be stuck processing development applications, and the developer effectively doesn't have to pay. Because we can't determine the actual cost. How many minutes did Alma spend today? And Alma got a pay raise tomorrow. Well, that's different cost. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So the Norco City Council is on record in opposition to this measure. Just so you know. Not picking on you all. Okay, here's one where we're not constrained, is the use of property. So this is interesting, Prop 26, Prop 218, they don't actually constrain us. We can charge what market rates will bear, but there's some practical constraints here, right? We can't just charge whatever we want for the use of our property. There's some, people are gonna pay, they're gonna rent Nellie Beaver Hall only if our cost is reasonable, or they're gonna go down the road and rent somewhere else. So there's some other practical limits here to that. Okay. So that's all revenues to the general fund, and the general funds are where we pay for most of our core services. Think of it as the pot where the taxpayers' money comes in to pay for the universe of services that are generally provided to everyone. But there's other revenues that go to other funds that have to be restricted for those purposes. So then we're going to talk a little bit about those. One is development impact fees. We call these DIFs around here, so acronym world. And other places you'll hear them called AB 1600 fees. That's the original enabling legislation for development impact fees. The concept here is this. If you're coming in and you're building 100 new houses, those new people that live in that house create new demand for infrastructure, right? They're going to drive down the road. They're going to call the police. They're going to call fire. They're going to go to a park. They're going to ride on a trail. So they're creating demand for infrastructure beyond just what's getting built in front of their 100 houses. So the development impact fee is a calculation of that value of that new demand to create infrastructure to serve that new development. It's about development paying its own way, as opposed to the existing residents just having to absorb the impact of these new people. And by people, also commercial. So I put some infrastructure, roads, parks, buildings, vehicles and equipment are subject to DIFs. So these are a really important way to mitigate the impact of commercial, industrial, and residential development. And they're a one-time charge. They have to be restricted into a certain fund and used only for those things. So we collect these here. We collect our road improvement DIF, and it goes into a pot. We have to use it for road improvements. We can't use it to pay for the sheriff or pay operating costs. It has to go only for capital. So it's really important. Our development impact fees are several years old now, and we're looking to update those this year.
Now, would this be for ADUs that I gave you the
Yes, so ADUs do pay
Okay.
development impact fees. They pay a prorated share based on the relative size of the unit in relation to the primary house.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, and if there's 750 square feet or more, if not, then we won't.
Correct.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that's under state law.
Okay. But, so I went through that a couple of years ago. The weird loophole to that is I could do a 749 square foot addition and not pay any fees.
Right?
A year later, I could do another 749 square foot addition. So that's just absurd to me.
I don't disagree.
Well, it's that kind of-
Right. In a lot of these things, on how we charge DIFs, anything related to residential especially, our hands are becoming more and more tied. There's more and more things. For example, we just learned recently, like we have traditionally always required an ADU to have a separate water meter. The state has preempted that and said you cannot require a separate water meter for an ADU. So just those things. So our code still says it, but it can't be enforced. Okay, so DIFs are hugely important to us. Another way, transportation funding. I'll let you digest this as you look, but essentially the big picture here is there's these various pots of money that come in to fund transportation. Think of that as the street and anything really related to the street. Sometimes it means the trail and the sidewalk, if there's a sidewalk. Sometimes it doesn't, depends on the pot of money, generally in the street. I love this little drawing that Michael Coleman does because I can't understand. I have no idea what it says, but my point here is it's a strange formula. Again, it's restricted. It's based on, this is HUDA, based on fuel taxes. We get our allocation from the state for this. Another one is another piece. This is the excise tax on fuel. Fascinating. We end up with a share of this. More recently, the state has been moving these formulas away from formulas that are tied to the price per gallon and more just tied to consumption per gallon. So instead of the numbers going up and down with the price of gas or diesel, it's more about the consumption of gas or diesel, and it's flat based on that. So that's interesting. Here's another one, RMRA. This was a huge boost in transportation revenue back in 2018 statewide. When you look around the state, you see all the freeway construction you're seeing. Most of that is driven by the RMRA from, they were the big recipients of this money back in 2017. We're still getting it. Interesting on this too, this as well as Measure A in the county, they have what are called maintenance of effort requirements. So cities are eligible for this money only if you can prove that you're spending the same amount of general fund on road maintenance as you did before. So in other words, you can't do a switcheroo. Like if you're spending $500,000 on streets and now they're going to give you $250 more, you can't cut your general fund by $250 and just like, you got to prove your maintenance of effort. And they come visit Lisette and
Every year.
she has fun presenting them schedules to prove maintenance of effort. So again, that's another thing we spend money and time on is compliance with all this stuff. And this was, good night. This is the one I was going to show you about consumption. So the good news is we're overall seeing a little bit more transportation money than we did. But the challenging news is because these things are all tied to consumption, consumption is fairly flat or declining. So the revenues aren't growing like you might think they would.
Especially since they want everybody to be electric.
Right, and so this is kind of why they went to this formula, is they wanted to try to start to, feel the pain of the electric, right? And that's why they enacted the additional car tax. We're all paying a little bit more, and then electric vehicle owners pay more to try to make up for the fact that they're not generating money into this pot. Doesn't exactly work. Okay, and I mentioned Measure A. This is the county's half-cent sales tax. We get a share of this, by a complicated formula in our area. So we get 29% of all the money that comes in from that half-cent, and based on the formula you see here. So a little bit mostly based on population, but a little bit based on taxable sales. Okay, water, sewer, I won't get into this too much, just to say that, again, like transportation funds like this, these money has to get accounted for separately in its own enterprise fund, and it's stranded there. So let's just say by some miracle, for example, recycled water, we're starting up that enterprise, we're gonna be building out, Public Works will be building out that infrastructure. If we made $1 million selling recycled water next year, that's fabulous. It stays in the recycled water fund. We can't transfer it out, we can't use it to pay for police or fire, other things. These funds have to stay self-contained. If they do well, that doing well stays in. They can't pay their proportionate share, like I say here, of overhead. We have what's called a cost allocation plan that takes the cost of what I'll call overhead, people like me, finance, city clerk, HR, facilities, and they spread those costs across our funds. They can pay for that, but they can't pay for anything else. They have to just pay for the enterprise.
You can get creative with that though.
You can get creative within boundaries. So I believe in boundaries. Like I don't look good in orange. It's not good. Good look on me. So yes, but we do want to make sure we're fully allocating cost. And actually, I think that's on our. Are we doing a cost allocation plan update? We are. That's another big update we're doing this year is an update to our cost allocation plan.
Because I don't know how Norco is, but most cities, their sewer funds are just loaded. So, I mean, I do a lot of work for cities, and they'll come to me and say, hey, we need this road paved. I said, well, go video take your sewer lines. Go see any of them. Let's see if any of them are bad. If they're bad, let's tear them up and let's repave the road when we do it. So we get very creative, and we're able to repair a lot of roads.
That is very interesting. Very interesting take. I would say it would be a little aggressive for my taste, but I hear you. There's definitely a proportionate share, potentially, that you could charge.
Correct.
Yeah, I hear you.
The whole thing runs right down the middle.
Right? That would be nice. And you have to tear up a big wide spot.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of big picture on revenues. City expenditures, this is going to go faster, I promise, the general fund. Here's the thing. People equals services. There's just no way, this is how it works. People, whether they work for us or they work for contractors, this is the central driver. This is how we provide services. Work gets done by people. It's very, it seems obvious, but I think we miss this sometimes in government, because people are sometimes viewed in the community as a liability or a negative. The reality is this is how we work, is through people. So, and labor costs, whether they're in our employee budget or with our contractors, this is our central expenditure, universally. I love this picture of our staff in the gym. Okay, what's the number one priority is also our number one cost driver, right? Any local government, public safety, police and fire is number one priority. It's also expensive. As you can see here, it's a big part of the budget. Why? Well, it's a high specialty role. Like, you don't get to just go, go on wherever people go, Craigslist, where do people go now? Hire people. You don't go on Indeed and find a police officer, a firefighter. High specialty, high risk, 24/7. It's just an expensive operation, extremely highly regulated. I mean, beyond regulated, especially at the state level and even at the federal level in some cases. So tons of money goes into that. And then the support costs are expensive, right? It's just not the boots on the ground, it's all the backup, all the people behind, all the training, all the personnel, all the record keeping. It's an expensive business to be in. I think we have, like I said here, contract cities tend to be slightly lower. There's a lot of economies of scale and regionalization of services. So we have a great deal here in Norco. I do it every day. I tell everybody we have an excellent service. We get a good price on it. No complaints. But nonetheless, it is a big part of every city's budget. Other labor costs. This is interesting because again, we talked about how specialty local governments are, right? All these levels of regulation. Those drive costs. We cannot go and hire an accountant who has been keeping a bookkeeper from a small business to come in and work with Lisette. It's literally a specialty. Look at Susan has built a whole career doing this, right? It's a specialty type of accounting. Understand all of the regulation that we've just begun to touch on and to be able to do it. That drives cost. It just does. Same thing with planners, civil engineers. IT is becoming some city clerks. I mean, city clerks are hard to find. We're trying to find one now, deputy city clerk. So that helps drive. I will say at the lower skilled levels, not so much, right? But most of our core team is pretty high skilled, and that does drive that. Now, here in Norco, I say we outsource quite a few of our operations, and that does help a lot. We spend a lot of our operating like things on like field maintenance, on mowing, trail maintenance. We outsource, even in like the water side, we outsource quite a bit of water system preventative maintenance. That's great, that really helps contain costs. But there are, again, state intervention. CalPERS is very interested in having us have as many employees as possible and as few contractors as possible, so that can be a challenge. As we know, pensions have been an issue that cities have struggled with for about 30 years. In 2012, there was a statewide move to kind of cap off and create a new kind of pension benefit for people that were hired after that. That has actually made a great difference and just continues to make a difference moving forward. And the final cost here, ongoing training, workforce development, something the council wrestled with this year at budget. Again, these people are filling specialty roles. They have to be trained. We have to develop them. There's a huge cost to not train them. Operation, this is a depressing list. As you can just see, there's just always something that's kind of coming at us. Insurance, the insurance market, as those of you who have businesses, you know, the insurance market's the worst it's been since the 70s. Our insurance rates are insane this year. It's not exciting, we gotta do it. And I go around City Hall saying this, no one drop of rain is responsible for the flood. That's how it feels. It's all these little things that they just keep picking on us about. How much are we spending on cybersecurity now? And we'll continue to do. So, maintenance. Now, this is really interesting. Just like your house, pay now, pay a lot later. Either way, you gotta pick our poison. Cities are notorious for this. When we've had to cut budgets, we cut maintenance, and because it's kind of invisible at first, but you pay for it later. And I know that here in Norco, that past councils did what they had to do to balance the books. And so a lot of it was in cutting maintenance. There was so few choices to be made back in those days. But there are costs to that. And long term, it's always better to invest in that maintenance over time. You're going to save money. But it costs money now, just like your house. Yeah.
This is one area for Measure R in particular. We've had some recent conversations about maintenance for what we're investing in. So we're using Measure R money to invest in capital and to invest in new facilities, but then how do we handle the maintenance cost of those going forward, right, without putting that extra stress on the city budget, right? So I think that's something we're gonna, as we talk in maybe it's future workshops, that might be something for us to talk about as a whole group and get some alignment on how we think about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll get into kind of the history there and kind of talk about what we were doing for maintenance before Measure R, which was, what was it, Greg, we were doing? I think you said.
This morning,
Yeah.
we had $350 million of assets being maintained by 2 part-time workers.
Wow.
They worked hard.
The whole barn was collapsing.
Right, the things falling on top of us, yeah. Again, I think that the councils did what they had to do to live within our means. We are required to adopt a balanced budget. We don't get to float, we don't get to print money like the feds or hunt. So we did what we had to do. Okay, capital. Everybody loves I love a good capital project. Just a couple notes on that. Really, it needs to include that life cycle cost, not just the cost of building the thing, but what does it cost to maintain and operate it over time? That is, I'll be honest, cities are not good at this, but we're learning, I think, from the past and getting better at that. Right now, costs are challenging. Poor Chad is here. Yeah, he's crying about the cost of capital right now.
Oh, it's worse than salary, huh?
It's yeah, that wasn't helpful. The tropical storm was not helpful. So, good budgeting includes that designated reserves. We're doing that now. We're starting that. We're taking our baby steps. It's really hard. It's really good. And, there's often money from other people to build things. There is no money from other people to maintain them. So it's something we have to think about when someone offers us money or property. For example, we struggled this winter, back in the day, way back in the day, as part of a subdivision development. The city was given some open space adjacent to the river, up here off of Shadow Canyon on the west side of town. And that started to slide down into the river over, and we spent, how much money, Amanda? $120,000 to shore up the hill so someone's house was secured. So again, it's lovely to give us your land, but there was no money given to us for maintenance and operation of that property, right? So not taking any free stuff anymore. Okay, so here's kind of the big picture for Norco. And I just took a couple screenshots of what I eyeballed on Google. Looked to me about the same amount of property. And you can see here, obviously, which one would you choose to live in? I think it's no-brainer which one we would all choose to live in. So, but this makes it fiscally challenging. We have fewer homes per acre. We have less assessed value per acre. This makes us, on the fiscal side, less efficient. It makes for an amazing quality of life, but it's just a fundamental to understand about how the math works here, as opposed to other cities that have chosen other development patterns that are less fiscally challenging. But then they have lifestyle trade-offs, right? They're not the kind of place that most folks would choose to live if they get to choose between these two. How does that impact? So it impacts AV per acre, assessed value per acre. So assessed value per acre is kind of, if you think of that as sort of the common denominator of understanding property tax, when you have fewer homes per acre, your AV is more limited. And again, that infrastructure inefficiency, especially roads, trails, water, sewer, it just becomes more inefficient. Now, our property values are typically higher per property, so that's good. But it's not enough to close that gap caused by the more dense patterns. So again, I'm just pointing out the facts. We're here we work every single day to preserve this lifestyle, but it's helpful for everybody to understand the economics of the lifestyle. Here's just a big picture where the money comes from for Norco. This is in the current budgets. This is our budgeted numbers. Oh, there's your number, Berwin. Is that on here? Maybe it's in other revenue. But you can see here, sales tax is the lion's share. Now, this is, even though this is not including Measure R, this is just including our Bradley Burns. Here. You've got this in your book, you can look this more, so. You can see that big green chunk at the bottom is the property tax, in lieu of VLF. It's really getting even bigger than just regular old property tax. Sales taxes are bread and butter. This is the 15-quarter trend. You can see we've had some good growth coming out of COVID. It kind of dipped down and leveled off, but we did have some good growth. And so during those years, that's when you saw the council adding back some folks to work on facilities and putting in that motor officer. So we were able to do some things when we saw a little bit of growth. But we are living and dying on sales tax right in here in our community. Not unlike many other cities. So I threw these in. These are things we talked about at budget time that I wanted to bring out again for the committee that we get to see. This chart is showing wage growth as compared to inflation. And what this is illustrating is that wage growth has not kept up with inflation. And what this is doing is eating into consumer spending, which is the bread and butter of our sales tax. So that's challenging. When inflation's up, people spend less on discretionary purchases. So you're seeing a lot of downward pressure on sales tax right now. We're going to get our fourth quarter 23 number in soon. So fourth quarter of the fiscal year, so March through June 2023, we'll get that soon. I think the preliminary number is we're slightly down statewide, and we'll be split down a little bit. It's hard. It's hard on people. People are having a tough time, so they don't buy the TV, they don't go to Target and buy brand new clothes, they don't go to Tractor Supply and buy all the new things. This is important to understand because you can see here how dependent Norco is on auto and transportation sales tax. Over time, we'd like to diversify more, see more growth in sales tax in some of these other categories, but general consumer goods, the green in the middle, that is just a hard category statewide. It's not growing, it's going to online. So the benefit here is we've got a really strong auto and transportation. That would include things like boats, RVs, trailers. They're all in that category. We have a good category there. And we want to continue to support that sector in town while trying to get more diversity. A lot of cities are seeing a lot of growth in restaurants and hotel sales taxes, so food and beverage. People don't have any money, but they love to eat out. This is America. I have a 22-year-old who has no money, but she is determined to DoorDash like 5 days a week and spend $30 for Chick-fil-A. I don't understand it, but it's what people do. They don't cook. You might have heard now officially people spend more on eating out nowadays than they do on groceries in America. It's been true for the last 2 years. It used to be significantly different, but the lines have crossed. You said which one you spend more money on?
No, my kids love to cook, so.
Okay, good. Very good. Very good. So it's okay. This is another hiccup in sales tax I want to draw to your attention. Council's seen this chart before. So this is illustrating sales tax per capita for Norco and some of our neighbors. We are the dark teal line. And you can see there's a lime green line that suddenly spikes in fourth quarter of 2020. That's Eastvale. So that spike in sales tax per capita to Eastvale corresponds with a change in the way that a very large retailer that begins with the letter A, that retailer shifted the way that they own their warehouses. So those warehouses were previously held by an entity out of state. So that sales tax for any product that came out of that warehouse was allocated to the countywide sales tax pool. So every city in the county of Riverside got a share of that sales tax based on its proportionate sale of sales tax countywide. So this, Norco receives 5% of the sales tax countywide, we would get 5% of that pool. Well, Amazon changed to, and they're created an entity that holds, that is an in-state entity that held that warehouse. So now every dollar of that warehouse's sales tax goes to Eastvale. So it's a huge loss. Now it's interesting for cities, if you see our line still went up because that shift corresponded with kind of that first wave coming out of COVID, Q4, that Christmas, when everybody got money from the feds and money from the states and spent money like drunken sailors that year, right? And we're at Home Depot. So it kind of hid the shift for a number of cities. Cities says, well, we didn't lose anything. But you did. You would have had a huge gain if not for these shifts. So that's challenging because again, we don't control that. Eastville certainly didn't do anything in particular. They're not bad people, but they're just a lucky recipient. So there's talk. Kevin's well aware of this. He sits on the Cal City's Revenue and Taxation Committee. There's been heated debate among cities about revisiting this issue and reconsidering how sales tax is allocated for when sales on goods that are coming out of warehouse distribution. And so I think this next year you'll see a lot of that heat up. I think that most cities recognize that cities with warehouses have some impacts. They've got trucks, they've got people coming, lots of traffic. However, they shouldn't get to keep it all. Because we also have trucks. We also have Amazon and UPS and all the delivery drivers. Our residents are spending their money. We should get it. So there's going to be debate about how we can look at doing something more equitable.
One city in the state of California gets all of the Best Buy money.
It's true.
One. And they have like no economic development, and they just, and they're talking about moving the Amazon Center. If they do that, you can see the actual line of Eastville at the bottom.
Yeah,
They
they roll.
have no economic development drivers.
Wow. So, incredibly frustrating. Okay, so where does the property tax go in Norco? Here's that slide from HDL. So you can see most of it, the answer is not Norco. We're down there, that little red, solid red piece down there, about 9 cents, rounding 10 cents on the dollar. It actually varies by tax rate area, TRA. The county has TRAs they're related to when developments were built, and was it before incorporation, after incorporation? It's a little fuzzy, but this is for Norco, this is a good illustration. Those pieces that are hatched, where you see the gray highlight, that's from the ERAF shift. So like that red piece that's kind of shaded, that used to be more of Norco's share, and that's one of the shares that the state took back when they did the ERAF shift. So that's super frustrating. But again, the school district is the big recipient of property tax.
And I just want to point out that on my street, they're going for $1.1 million, but they're bringing their property tax, their Prop 13 values, so we're not getting any more property tax. So they're selling in Yorba Linda, they're selling in
they're
Brea,
porting there.
Orange Park Acres, and then moving into,
Because they're 55, so they're
Yeah.
55. Yeah, so that was that Prop 19? Is that the name?
yeah, Prop 13.
No, but there was the more recent
Prop
one.
90.
Prop 90, right? So that's a great issue. So good, nice benefit. If you're over 55, you can port your base. Yeah, but we don't get we won't see the full bump on growth for those people. This is showing sales of single-family homes. The chart on the left is statewide, and you can see as mortgage rates have risen statewide, sales have declined. And then on the right, you see our Norco numbers. We'll see where we land in 2023. You can just see the volume coming off the highs. When mortgage rates are 6 or 7%, that's challenging. And again, like Susan's alluding to, the turnover helps us because generally speaking, that brings more value up, brings up. We have many residents here in town who have a property tax bill of less than $250. Many. And here's value. This is Norco, and this is as of February. You can see we've had strong price growth until recently, and then prices have kind of leveled off. So it's just big picture, so you can see where you are. But this has become a very high-priced community to live in, and I would say at that median of $735, that's a modest home in Norco. I think if you have a home that is updated, you're definitely 7 figures. You're $1 million in Norco. Okay, other notes. So the decision to contract out fire, I've heard the stories about how that went. It was a difficult decision, but I can tell you that was a good decision fiscally.
Not for some of us.
Difficult for some of you.
Not if you saw the checkbook, that one, they wasn't bad at all.
I know, yeah, I bet. No, it was a great change. Again, we get great service, but we get the efficiency of that regionalization. We get a standing army. If there's a giant something that happens in Norco, the Army's on its way, courtesy of Cal Fire and County Fire. But the cost to us is just significantly lower. I think the model here for how we run, we mix in contract services with a core group of highly trained, talented folks. I think it's a good place to start. It's a good way to go. Our benefits and salaries are about right on average. We're not highly paying here, but we're not at the bottom of the barrel either. So the council's been committed to try to be at that average so we can keep people. And I can tell you the last year, we've really done well. We've lost a few people to retirement and passing away, and maybe probation. But other than that, I think we've had one full-time person since we addressed some of these salary issues, move on for a promotion in another city. Haven't had any more of that, so that's good. We want some continuity. And then just, historically, as Greg told the story, we had been very underinvested in capital, pre-Measure R, so we're working on that. Here's some of the good things. So this is demographics from Retail Strategies, our economic development consultant. It's hard to read, but bottom line is we've got a great, strong retail market here, a great market for restaurant, food and beverage. These are this is the income within a 10-minute drive time. So in other words, when you think about where a restaurant locates or where a store locates, it's not about Norco. It's actually about the drive time all around us. So they're not looking at, well, there's only 27,000 people in Norco. No, they're saying there's 191,000 people within 10 minutes of this place. So that is fantastic. So that's why we're going to continue to see opportunity along Hamner, along 6th Street to really capture some of that money that's sitting all around us, some of that high household income, and bring it back in here to Norco. Again, most of that's going to be in hotel. It's going to be in food and beverage. Retail, brick and mortar, you're just not going to see a lot of that. And then just a couple slides on expenditures. This is where the money goes. This is the budgets for this year. So you can see it, we're right about, what percent are we at? We're like right about 46, 47% on public safety. So we're right in there at the average or maybe even a little low. So that's really good. And then you see how the rest falls out there. Just general fund here. And then this is the same data, just in a pie. You can chew on that. So in a lot of the older cities that have their own police and fire, you're going to see that more like 70%, 75%. You're really starting to squeeze out other operations, and they become just focused on law enforcement because you send over money. Okay, and then I kind of put in here an expenditure summary. You can look at this. Some of this you saw this, but again, contract rates. Again, I buy this. This is a good deal, but rates go up. They get raises. CAL FIRE's trying to compete with the city fire departments that have a better schedule and then pay wildly better than CAL FIRE, so they're trying to catch up a little. And then just things creeping up on us. Okay, what did I say about budget future hold? So again, this is something I shared with the council back in budget. We need to kind of stay this size in terms of staffing because that's kind of where I'm seeing it. We're only going to grow when we see sustainable revenues. We're going to have to supplement with contracts, with outside resources where we have to. We're going to keep focusing on economic development and making good investments, and we got to make sure new development pays its way. We do not have the luxury of floating new development. It's got to pay its own way. It just has to. So, all right. So here's my quick SWOT. So take it for what you will. This is Lori's opinion piece. Okay, this is editorial portion. Do with it what you will. But I think this is a good representation of what everybody kind of feels. Tell me if you think differently about these things. Okay, strengths. Stable government. I cannot tell you how important that is, having worked in some troubled cities previously. Like when you have a stable city council, you can do anything. You can move mountains. And when you have an unstable city council, you have churning and turnover, drama. It spirals everything out of control. So we're very fortunate here in that. We're lean, very conservative spending traditionally. That's great. We're not Menifee facing like 150,000 new people coming to town, right? We're stable. We're about right here. Our population actually declined a little bit in the last couple of years. So it's stable population, stable service demands, right? We're safe. So that means we have relatively lower costs for tariffs. Again, we don't have some of the struggles of some of the other communities. Praise God, we're good. So that keeps our costs down, building those reserves. That economic cluster here around animal keeping, equestrian is a huge asset. All that's happening on 6th Street, that's why, among many reasons, but one of the main reasons why Circle D is here, where these businesses kind of support one another. It's amazing. Silver Lakes is an engine for us. It powers hospitality for us along Hamner and all the other things that we're seeing on Hamner, the new hotel going up. And then Ingalls is powering. You know, Ingalls brings people. They spend money here. They fill hotels. You know, this week the Mounted Officers Association has filled the Fairfield Inn doing their training at the Ingalls. It's fantastic.
There's about 140 of those guys that sell.
That's great.
And we don't want them like them cook.
They're not cooking. No. They're definitely not cooking. I saw them Sunday night after the Gold Star Moms. There had to have been 25 horses at the Saddle Store. They all rode down. You know, they all rode down.
Yeah.
It's great. Okay, so that's strengths. What are our weaknesses, I think? Well, sales tax is cyclical, so I think our general fund is vulnerable in recession. Lisette and I were talking about this. Car dealers are amazing. And then when there's a recession, car dealers feel it first. They eat it. And so we have a vulnerability there. Utility rates relatively high, again, because of this cost per acre issue. So that's an ongoing challenge. You know, no one wants to pay more for water or sewer or trash. We have relatively high rates, but that's a challenge. Back here, you know, we don't have, those reserves are starting, but we don't have a lot. We don't have much in reserves for capital replacement. Ingalls is an amazing asset, but it does take a significant general fund subsidy. We spend quite a bit of money on north of $1 million a year on Ingalls net. So that's a challenge. A lot of this cost growth, again, is outside our direct control. So a lot of this we cannot drive. And then as we're aging, the community's starting to age, we do have older infrastructure that's needing repairs. You know, Amanda just talking today, I would send a note to the council that this building failed its fire sprinkler inspection. Why? Because the fire sprinklers are old. So we got to fix that. You know, things just go wrong. You got to replace it. The irrigation at Wayne Macon is ancient. We got new controllers, but the pipes are old. So it's got to get fixed. So it's a challenge. Where are the opportunities? Well, in the general plan update, you know, we really have some opportunities to think about what we want to see on Hamner and 6th. Like what, you know, Berwyn's got some great ideas, but what can we do that the community wants to see to really attract even more businesses along that corridor, get people out of their cars, wanting someplace to go at night. Well, where do I want to go? Well, I'm going to go walk 6th Street. I'm going to pop in here and eat and get ice cream and have a drink, shop. I mean, we really have opportunity on 6th, and then on Hamner, more focused toward, I think, Ingalls and Silver Lakes, again, building up those hotels, other uses. Agritourism is a huge opportunity. We've got all kinds of really neat businesses already doing great agricultural things here, and people want to get out and do things, right? So they may not be shopping, but they want to go out and see a farm and have a meal, or ride a horse, or pet a goat, or do goat yoga. I mean, all those things.
We have an issue though with some of the newer centers where there's nowhere to park.
That's interesting.
And entering and exiting, and it's very difficult where Bronx's and Starbucks and Wieners. I mean, if I feel like I want to go over there, it's like I drive by, it's like forget it. There's nowhere to park. I go on. We don't have parking properly.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is a constrained site for sure right there. It's always very interesting with parking.
And then we're adding the Dutch Brothers there.
Yeah,
No
one's
parking.
right. Well, you can't go into Dutch Brothers, so that's good. You got to
Well, the cars are going to be.
Yeah.
But the building is ginormous. They say it's Dutch Brothers and Freddy's Custard, but the building is a 2-story giant building, so what else is going to be there?
No, that's the
That's
hotel.
another hotel.
That's the
That's
hotel.
another-
They're building
That's
the
the
Dutch
two
Brothers
bedrooms.
just adjacent to where Brunks is.
I know, it's confusing.
But there is no parking. You've got the dance studio and I don't, it's gonna cause accidents. It confused me. I'm excited to have the new businesses. I love that we're getting new businesses.
Yeah.
But it kind of fears me with the parking situation.
Yeah, it's the downside of a good situation, right? And we're gonna have to continue to keep our eye on it and try to manage it as best we
Parking's
can.
not big enough.
We'll have to see what happens when it all goes in. We'll have to see. I think that it also depends on the time of day, but there's definitely some constraints there. I hear this from a lot of people.
How do I build a parking structure?
Right?
Will be when everybody has to start riding on those little tiny electric cars.
You ride a horse, it takes less room.
That's right, ride a horse.
Silver Lakes, again, we talked about that. They've got plans for new things to really bring even more people into their site. That's right, that's wonderful. Six and Hamner has been something that council's looked at, that like pie. That's really ripe for a really good quality development there. We've got to own it. We've got to get that Caltrans park and ride. But ultimately, that's the goal there. That's a great opportunity. Again, having development pay its own way, updating our diffs. They also looking at operational CFDs for new development. So as new development comes in, as we're adding, we've been required to zone for some of these multifamily complexes. We can create a community facilities district, a CFD, not for bonds, not a mellow ruse for bonds, but more of an annual fee to say for police and fire, to pay for police and fire. I think we gotta look at that. The prison, Norco CRC, we've advocated for that site to be closed if the state's gonna close the prison. Makes more sense to close that than Chuckawalla and Blythe. We haven't been successful in that argument, partially because what we hear is that potentially at some point Norco CRC is going to close anyway. So, but when it does, that's an amazing opportunity to look at like the Mission Inn of the west end of the county. That building is incredible. Buildings, yes,
Yeah.
all the complex, really, the complex. It's just an incredible site. And then another site that we have that's is potentially for development is the Hidden Valley, the old Wiley Labs site. So that there's plans there potentially. We'll see what happens, but those are opportunity sites. And then threats. So threats are things from the outside. Again, this online sales tax thing, the Amazon shift, all that's happening. That's a problem for us to wrestle with. What the state does to us, public safety cost growth, pressure for uses. So I put this here. Alma and I went to the shopping center convention this year, and how many car wash businesses did we see at the shopping center convention?
Oh my gosh.
That's the big thing, yeah.
These car washes make money.
10, 15. So they're a cash cow. They're really inexpensive to set up, and they make a ton of money. So there's a lot of pressure to do them. We're not doing them here. We don't need any more car washes in Norco. We're not permitting them. Warehousing, again, there's a lot of money in warehousing. We've got our share. Service uses in general, hey, we all people want to get their nails done, get their lashes done. That's great, but we don't need whole shopping centers full of lash businesses, right? It doesn't actually generate any economic benefit to us. So we have to keep our eye on that ball. The car wash thing is fascinating. It's the next CVS Walgreens. 20 years ago, everybody's putting up CVS and Walgreens, and they all shut down. I think car washes are in that.
Question, so I'm hearing the Rite Aids shut down.
Yes. Oh, our Rite Aid doesn't surprise me.
No, I don't know about ours.
Yeah, one in Riverside.
Doesn't surprise me. So all those are consolidating down,
We're
those
also
Rite
talking
Aids,
about
Walgreens.
Targets.
Yeah, Target in the distressed areas like in San Francisco, urban Portland, all the places where they're getting hit repeatedly. So with theft and loss.
Well, what are we gonna do about on 6th Street? Our Rite Aid gets hit every week, it seems like.
You know what?
Robbers, thieves, they've been held up.
Help themselves.
Oh, yeah. They get, walk in there and ask the people behind the counter every week. They're handing over the money. It's really frightening on 6th Street. I hate to
Besides
say
that,
it.
they go in there and take all the goodies too. They fill their bags.
They went in, they broke into the day spa there and torn everything. They're right at that area at Valley View. They've been, I don't know who they are, but
That liquor store owner over there.
Right?
They broke into the liquor store.
Yeah, they broke into the wrong liquor store a few months back.
that's a different one. That's further down by where our shopping center is, and I've had to tell my girls, don't go out the back. We're going out the front. It's frightening right now.
They just hit the little market at their little Rainers used to be on 60 got.
Oh, really? Well, if you own it, you can carry a gun. Yeah, but it's scary. Anyway.
Those are things we need to keep our eye on for sure. And then we talked about the Business Roundtable initiative for 2024. So that passes. So we'll look ahead. So hopefully you guys can have some discussion here too. But we'll talk next time more about Measure R itself, and then talk about finances. So hopefully this was helpful. I mean, hopefully, especially for community members, council members who might have PTSD from all of this. We all lived this for so many years, but hopefully to help you guys kind of see where our challenges come from.
This was very helpful, and I really appreciate that you put it in plain language easy to understand, so you did a great job, thank you.
Quick question for you. Once you start looking at plots of land that's undeveloped or developed, so what kind of revenue does the city of Norco get from the community college?
None. So the community college is not on the tax roll. It's publicly owned. So there's some benefit to the college to the extent that students and faculty shop or buy gas or buy lunch in town. And if there's, I think there is a small, very small little cafeteria function at the college. So that's taxable to us and we would get that. But it's very minor benefit direct.
The
It was
amount
the
of
Navy
people,
base and the prison.
yeah, tons of land that's being utilized, but we're not getting any benefit.
Correct. Now, there is indirect benefit in terms of people that work at Norco College, to the extent that they live in Norco and around us, that's high wage work. Those are good jobs if you work at a community college, but that's not a direct to our bottom line, right? It's great to have those jobs in town, it's a great asset, but it doesn't directly fill our bottom line.
What's going on with the shopping center off of 2nd Street, or that business complex? How far are we on that?
The new one with like the Dollar Tree, or?
No, the
That's the
one,
same ranch.
yeah, the one off of 2nd.
Oh, the industrial development,
Yeah.
Pellegino. So their first phase is built out, and they've got, I think they're getting, where are they on the second phase? They're in permits in the second phase. So that first phase is built out. I think they have one building, they have a tenant in that one building, but it's not a sales tax generating tenant. So generally speaking, that scale of warehouse industrial does not generate direct benefit to cities. When you get bigger, and like Eastvale with the place that begins with the letter A, because those are product is in the warehouse when it's ordered, then there's sales tax going to that community.
But wasn't that part of the whole Palomino thing, is to get some revenue?
Well, the properties themselves are high value, so that will come onto the property tax roll and we'll get our share. That's a very significant industrial development, but they're paying the 1% and we're getting our little share of the 1%. So
Then what about the housing that's going up at the corner over by the college?
if that gets built out, that will provide more in terms of net value, but then we also got to look at demand, right? So there's some cost to services as we build out more density. There's more demand for police, fire, so there's some associated.
When I was on
schools.
ESAC, that was one of the things that we had talked about, that there might be like some restaurants in there and
Yeah, that is in their project, and my understanding is if they build that's still there, there's like that food garden.
So
actually
it's
kinda charming.
not a done deal there.
Well, when they start turning dirt, I'll believe it, right? So, dirt's not turning, so we'll see.
About just Norco College, we carry 900 acres of government buildings. The Navy base, they fill our hotels Monday through Thursday. But in essence, most communities do not want junior colleges. The junior college's value to us is the vocational training. It creates a workforce which you hope will stay, and that's why we're working so hard at the Tech Bridge and things like that. We're trying to have people educated that stay in our community and get jobs. But one of our crosses to bear is we carry 900 acres in government. The school district, which they do shop and restaurants, City Hall, the prison, which, I'd say they shop for gas, but it's negligible. College, of course,
And
the
the base.
welfare office, the DMV.
We also don't we have 20 churches or some?
We have
Which is more than property
61
tax.
churches the last
Yes.
time.
So, and that was part of the argument for
But that's why we
Measure
have
R.
Hobby Lobby.
Yeah. That was part of the argument
They
for
want to be in
Measure
town
R,
with lots
was
of
that,
churches.
was that we had all this nonprofit, and, it's a matter of who pays for what. So we wanted the people who came and spent money, drove up and down our streets to help pay for that infrastructure. That was part of the argument
And the Navy is,
or discussion.
my understanding is that the Navy is one of the, if not the highest wage employer in the county, the west end of the county. So that's a huge benefit to everyone on the west end in terms of spending power, but again, not directly to our bottom line, but it indirectly in terms of home sales, property, but not directly.
7% of the Navy folks live in Norco, 7%. All the
We
rest
see a
are
lot of the
overseas.
people that work there, eat next door at Yazoo or shop at our store or go down 6th Street and spend their money, so that's nice to know. Because I
That's
kind of question people where they came from, I like to kind of do a little poll, so.
I haven't been a resident of Norco for a long time, but I've been in the community since '92. So I've seen the growth and I've seen it. But one thing I just lived on the outskirts of Norco for many years, and one thing I would see when I drive in is that I notice, and I notice probably more than the general public because I'm in public works construction, and I just watch everything. But you see all the cars that come down Hamburg and turn into the college, and when they leave, they go right back out and they go to Second, and you can see how it affects the staging of the traffic signals. And so I just see the congestion and the wear and tear on the streets. Same thing for Rupa Valley when they got incorporated. I was doing consulting work for them. And I advised city council, I said, you gotta raise their property, you gotta raise their tax for business taxes. They said, well, we don't tax them. I said, you have to. No, we'll get voted out if we do that. You won't, because most of those business owners don't even live in Rupa Valley. And that's what they wouldn't grasp. And the problem is, and most people don't know it, Rupa goes, far. And most of it's all industrial, and those trucks just destroy the roads, and it's a huge cost that they're trying to figure out how to deal with, and they don't make any money.
Yeah, so in hindsight, they would really benefit from adopting like a CFD for in the industrial, making all those people pay an assessment for forever to go back into repaving streets, doing, things to help, because that truck traffic is gonna eat those streets.
Yeah, they did talk about it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, they did talk about it, but Haruka's had a lot of turnover. And so, that's probably why they had several city managers, and that's what you were talking about, turnover. If you don't have a stable city.
Well, they're still almost all contract. So,
I know, I worked there, I was one of the first 14 employees.
so I probably worked with you at some point in time.
Besides all the health issues from the smog, there was a big report on that about 5 or 6 years ago, the diesel smoke and all the little kids that were having health issues over in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greg was trying to check.
I was just gonna say with the Rupa Valley in their wisdom, instead of like a CFD, they put industrial buildings into an LMD.
That works too.
Yeah.
That works too.
And they still have a lot of land over there that's still being developed, so, I mean, that's just, because that was one of the big concerns that I heard when we went around their acreage, all those got redone and what's going in there. If it's just warehouses, it's just gonna be a lot of traffic, but it's not gonna generate any revenue for the city.
It's supposed to have other things besides just warehouses in that complex. Almeda was meant to have warehouses and office buildings and some food as well, right, Kevin?
In one corner, yeah.
There's a commercial component.
One corner.
There's a commercial component on First and First and Mountain
That's the last phase.
So we'll be hopeful for that.
So when you
We
mentioned,
actually, in that intern, forgive me, Greg and I were the first ones to meet, and one of the things we were trying to do was replicate the Easy Up and all of the shops. So, there's the Flavor Place, that's why we were trying to make them small to stay away from the warehouse.
They look nice.
I've just been asked if we could use microphones because people that are watching it
Oh.
can't hear.
Can you turn your mics on?
are you allowed to say what's happening with the Wyland property?
Sure, so that property is zoned preservation and development in our general plan, so it requires a specific plan to develop. So we did a workshop, when did we do a workshop? Fall? January?
Okay.
Somewhat, yes, in recent months, we did a workshop the council did a workshop with the developers, and they brought some concepts for that property. involving kind of office, medical use, and they did have some warehousing on that thing. I don't want to speak for the council members, but I think the council generally gave them feedback that warehousing was not what the council had envisioned for that site at all. Medical office, some kind of office, a resort hotel up on the top of the tech bridge potentially, yeah, something that where people could, do office type uses, but warehousing was not the council's desire. So they, with that information, they went back and they're working on some draft specific plans. So
they're still talking about a hotel.
As I understand, I have not yet seen their specific plan draft, but I understand they're working on, staff has given them some comments on an initial draft, and we might see some coming back to Council Planning Commission for review here in the near future. So we'll have to see.
The hotel is a legacy project for Great Lansing.
For who? Oh,
For the owner of the property, that's something that more than anything he wants to build over their summer.
Now, on the Second Street development, just because I don't know a lot about it, but the big detention basin that was put on the other side of it, ultimately, will the city have to maintain that, or is that county?
No, it's maintained by the property owner.
Excellent. Okay, good job, Chad. That is, so that's one thing that LA County is really fighting with right now. As Chad probably knows, most of your development projects, you always have to clean water runoff, so if you're doing new catch basins, they have to be, the filtration systems and all that. So LA County had me do an assessment for them many years ago in Marina Del Rey. And so the cost of some of those basins is like $40,000, $60,000, but the cost to maintain them far exceed that. And so they did the Oxford Basin in Marina Del Rey, they had a cost to revitalize it was like $8 million, and they asked me, so what do you think the maintenance costs are? And I said, well, what were you spending on it last year? He said, about $40,000. I said, quadruple it. And so then they came to me and they said, we want to take all the LA basin channels, they're all concrete lines that you see in all the movies, and they wanted to revitalize them and make them all dirt. I said, so what are you spending on maintenance on that? And I said, multiply by 100. So cities throughout everywhere, I mean, they're having to adhere to these new requirements of water cleanliness, and it's an enormous maintenance cost. So
yeah, there's no money coming for that.
No,
there's no funding source.
Yeah, it's like you said, you gotta, how are you gonna recover that maintenance cost? So the maintenance cost is anywhere from 5 to 10 times more, so.
so in this presentation, there was no diagram of how much we're receiving on Measure R and where that money's going.
Right, that's coming next time.
Uh,
Good question, excellent question. Great. Any other questions or discussion, Mayor? I'm happy to.
Come on, Omar,
speak up. Omar, yes, Omar, any questions from our new commissioner?
Just trying to take everything in.
It's a lot, right? It's a lot. Trust me, it's not you. It's cities have sort of been set up for this complicated, ridiculously complicated situation. It's very frustrating, and yet here we are. We got to live in the real world to deal with it. So.
All right, so then we're going to go ahead and move to public comments. At this time, this is when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding matters not on the agenda can be heard. You can submit a speaker card. Limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Do you have any?
I have no comment for this.
Perfect.
Good luck with your job.
All right, then, ladies and gentlemen, our next item is to go ahead and adjourn the workshop. And so City Council, we're done. Measure R committee, have fun at your meeting. All right, thank you.
Take a 2-minute break. You get 2 minutes or so.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start again. Appointment of a new chair and a new vice chair. And so with that, I'd like to nominate Susan Oversight for the position of chair for the next term.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to elect Susan as the chair for the coming year? For the current
Yes.
year, or the current year? I'll hand over the gavel to her.
Oh, we gotta vote.
Oh, we have to vote, sorry. Oh, yes. Okay, please vote. Oh, all those in favor? Aye.
Say their name.
Yeah, say their name.
They just
Do roll.
You do a
You have to do a roll.
call each of their
Okay.
names, it's a roll
Yeah.
call, and then they'll say yes or no.
Okay, I'm used to everybody's. Okay. Susan Olmsted Brown?
Bowen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I put my glasses back on. Richard Wiesmer?
Yes.
So we have different list on here. Okay, Yvonne Shaw? Yes. Make your motion. Jerry Burke?
Yes.
Sean Gill?
Yes.
John Clapham?
Yes.
Victoria
John's
Leonard?
Yes.
And Omar Sanchez.
Yes.
So,
Passes unanimously.
yes, is there no objections? Motion passes unanimous.
All right. This ultimate supreme ruler. Okay, so we move on to appointing the vice chair. Do we have any nominations? I nominate Yvonne to be vice chair.
Second.
I'm sorry, that was Richard?
Mr. Beesmer.
Okay. So, we'll go through now chair, Susan Olmsted Bowen.
Yes.
Yes. Yvonne Shaw,
Yes.
Richard Wiesmer,
Yes.
Jerry Burke,
Yes.
Sean Gill,
Yes.
John Clapham,
Yes.
Victoria Leonard,
Yes.
and Omar Sanchez.
Yes.
Okay. All approved, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, committee. And our next item is the consent calendar, in which we're going to approve the minutes from the June 28th, 2023 meeting. So these things are all listed. So does anybody have anything they want to pull out of the consent calendar?
Where is that?
Do we have the budget?
Yes, it's in there. So, if you want to go ahead and read what's under the consent calendar.
Okay, so what's under the consent calendar is approved the Measure R Oversight Committee regular meetings minutes from June 28th. The Measure R fiscal year 2022-23 budget to actual report, which is in your board packet. I got carried away. So, all items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted by one motion. Prior to the motion to consider any action by the presiding governmental body, any public comment on any of the consent items will be heard. There will be no separate action unless members of the governmental body or the audience request specific items be removed from the consent calendar. Items removed from the consent calendar will be separately considered under item 3 of the agenda. Are there any items that want to be pulled from the consent calendar? No items were moved, so can we please have a motion to approve the consent calendar as it is?
Second.
Okay. Olmsted Bowen,
Yes.
Yvonne Schultz,
Yes.
Richard Deesman,
Yes.
Jerry Burke,
Yes.
Sean Hill,
Yes.
John Clausen,
Yes.
Victoria Leonard,
Abstain.
and Omar Sanchez.
Yes.
Okay, so we have, no, this was from, is this from the city council? So this is not, this is just informational?
That's information.
It's just information. So, then we need, committee staff communications, or do we have to do public comment? It's not on there.
We already did.
We already did?
Yes.
Okay, well then, we're gonna adjourn the meeting.
I do have a communication. On the handout that you guys received, I just wanted to inform you that City Council, we took the Measure R procedures on how we, when we have projects that need additional appropriation, to see what options we had to communicate with Measure R, whether we have to come back to Measure R to approve those additional appropriations. That's the staff report that was handed out. Based on that meeting, council did recommend option number 1, which is to not come back to Measure R when we need additional funding for projects, but we will notify you once those are approved by City Council when that does occur. And we will be formalizing the procedures and policies and taking it back for formal approval to council.
Thank you.
Now, on the staff reports, when we look at these online,
Yes. So,
we should be able to pull them up. I couldn't pull one of them up today, so.
oh, okay. If you ever have any issues, please email our city clerk or contact me myself as well, and we could see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to go back and look at some of the old meetings and I couldn't pull them up either.
Did it give you like a login screen? Was that the prompt?
Well, we go to the login screen, and when I went in, I had the same issue as, I
There was
think it was
nothing
just
that came
older,
up.
older staff report.
Okay, we'll look into it.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned.